I'm back from the Northwest 200 and I got back excited for my new wheel bearings to be sat waiting for me. And they hadn't turned up. So then I had to wait a little bit longer. So I did some TT prep on the BM, which other than putting the fuel tank on is ready to go. And then I went to a BSB weekend because the wheel bearings still weren't here. But luckily now they have arrived, which is excellent news, and I can put that back on its wheels after I've taken the old wheel bearing out of the back wheel. And to do that, I'm going to be using a very subtle technique with fire and a big hammer. While I've been away, I have been soaking this in penetrating fluid, so it has got a fighting chance of coming out. I say fighting chance, it is going to come out, one way or another. I've also gone back to the technique of putting the rollers in the inner of the bearing so I can actually hit something, and this time I've left it long enough that the silicone has dried, and so the bearing balls are definitely kept in place. So all I need to do now is light the fire, get that as hot as I can, and give it a gentle tap with the biggest hammer available. Victory is mine! Victory is mine! While the wheel is still warm, it's an ideal chance for me to slide the new bearing because the wheel should accept its bearing a little easier. So I'm just going to give it a little clean up in the hole to get rid of any rust and corrosion, which there is a bit, with a bit of Scotch-Brite, and then it's time to slip a new ring in. We're finally making some progress. Wheel bearings fitted, new ones into the front wheel and the back wheel. What I'm going to do next, before I actually put the back wheel in, is clean these calipers and put some new pads in. Now these pads actually don't look too bad, but I have no idea how old they are or even what they are. And so I'd rather have brakes that I know will work. So I'm taking these out and putting some EBC pads in that I actually like. So toothbrush and bits in there, scrub the pistons as much as I can, make sure everything slides, pop it all back together, hang it on the disc, feel like you're winning. So the Deauville, or is it Deauville? Or is it Deauville? Or is it Deauville? Actually, answers on a postcard for how you pronounce Deauville. Right, that's the bit the caliper slides on, and it slides on that pin, and there's a pin on the caliper that slides into there. This side one was distinctly corroded and sticky, so a little light hammering and that's come apart, so I'm just going to make sure the bore's fairly clean. I've cleaned a light bit of corrosion off there, so I'll make sure that's all greased up because the caliper has to slide because it only has pistons on one side. So basically, if you imagine the disc running down there, when the caliper pistons push against the disc, the caliper then has to slide across so that the pads on the other side disc grip the other side of the disc. It's a cheaper way to build a brake caliper. So they have to slide properly, so I'm going to make sure that's nicely greased up. The caliper slides, the pistons are surprisingly clean, which makes me believe that they might have been replaced at some point in their life, and I'm okay with that. So, calipers are clean, pistons move, slidey bits, once I put it back together, will slide with a dab of grease on them, and a new set of pads, one side, done. Coming down to this end of the bike, this one is less of a bonus. Basically, the pin that holds the pads in is seized. Can't get it out. Mole grips, pipe grips on the bar don't move it, and if I look down the hole, the Allen key, the cap screw in there, is rounded off. Conveniently, the pads are actually okay. So I've just got a bit of lubrication behind the pistons and I've managed to get them moving a little bit. So what we're going to do with the back caliper is put it back on the bike with the old pads in. Because I don't actually use a lot of back brake. If I can get away without using any of the brakes, I shall get there faster. So motivation there for not using any of the brakes, I think. Some more solid progress. The wheel is in, the brake is on, the brakes work. That's always a bit of a bonus. I'm not going into as much detail as I sometimes do about cleaning brakes and putting wheels in and this and that, because there is a bit of a time scale this week because I need to get this finished and on the road, and then on Friday I'm on a boat to the Isle of Man with this and the Aprilia. So that's why I'm not going into mega detail. There is a bit of a rush. The next thing I can do though is actually put the exhaust back on. So I will be sliding the big bit of pipe down here. The two sort of link pipes will connect into the headers down here, and then I can actually nip the nuts up in there, and then we can see if we've got any chance of it actually starting. So I nearly got carried away thinking I could make fast progress on this. But no. So this is the second half of the exhaust system, and in this one is part of the header from the rear exhaust that snapped off in it. So I need to get that out before I can put the exhaust together. But I am going to use a very, very subtle technique here, which involves a hammer and a punch to basically break that apart and then pull it out. Getting the end out of that pipe wasn't quite as easy as I hoped, because it was quite stuck in, but I do have it now on a bearing puller. So yes, a bearing puller for removing bits of exhaust is the future. The only slight problem we have now, ignoring the gasket on there that we don't need, is that obviously there should be 3 sections of sort of expanding joint that we clamp up, and this one now has 1 piece, which isn't enough to clamp anything to. So I have an exhaust pipe ready to fit, some exhaust headers ready to accept their master, and then I have a little bit of basically like thick shim steel that I've bent round. So that's going to go over that, and then the header will slide into everything, and then it will all fit perfectly. And of course the bolt down here that used to have no head on it, I've managed to get out the hole, so I can put a bolt in there, I can put the original bolt back in there, everything will tighten up, nip up the Jubilee clips, and all of the exhaust gas, mostly, will stay hopefully in the exhaust, which will be a novelty. The advantage to working on a bike you don't care about is my OCD can have a day off. This is not a nice exhaust fix, but it is functional of it will attach that piece of pipe to that piece of pipe and give it a bit of support. I don't imagine it'll hold much of the gas in, but the ends of the pipe are basically butted together, so it'll be okay. There should be a bolt in there, and there should also be a bolt further down here to hold the heat shield on, but they've been broken off ages ago, so I've put a Jubilee clip on to stop it rattling, because otherwise it would do my OCD. So now the exhaust pipe's on, and I've tightened up the head, in theory we could start the bike. Except I checked the battery, had 6 volts in it, it's knackered. So there's another battery on the way, but I can at least do some of the service jobs. Next on the agenda for the Deauville is to do some of the normal service work. So I've got an air filter for it, some spark plugs. I've actually bought some new throttle cables for it, because things that are easy to let you down on a long ride, throttle cables is fairly high on the list. And I've also realised why the battery was dead. In the little cubby hole up here, there was a USB connector, permanently live. So that's killed the battery. But it will be very practical when I'm travelling to have a USB connector available, so I don't really mind too much. And a new battery, again, is a practical thing for reliable motoring. The air filter doesn't actually look too bad, but there are weird things going on inside the airbox. One of the trumpets, inlet, bell, nails, whatever you want to call it, only had 1 bolt in it, and that bolt was not terribly tight. Then when I looked a little bit closer, the seal that seals the airbox to the throttle body was trying to be sucked inside. So it's a good job we caught that in time. Right, I should now be able to undo a couple of pipes off and take the airbox off. So having had the airbox off, I've already changed the throttle cables, and conveniently there's basically nothing in the way. They are pretty much as easy as throttle cables get, and they are now snappy, so they feel spot on. I've changed the rear spark plug, and of course then I was going to change the front. It's a little bit more awkward. Turns out I didn't really need to get a tool on that because it wasn't tight. And if I pick it back off the bench, and you can actually see that even all this area around here that should be obviously sealed, that tends to get a bit rusty and dirty from the weather, is black with soot. So that's not been working very well. Time to fit a new one. Front spark plug in, and then I've also noticed this is not attached to this, and it should be. And when I picked the bike up, interestingly, Sean did say that every now and again it'd have an FI fault, a fuel injection fault, and misfire a little bit. And it could be something as simple as that, just popping off the pipe. So we'll push that together. That's actually quite firm when it's on. Took that out of the way somewhere, not actually sure where it's going to go. I'll took that out of the way in a minute. Put the airbox back on. Might wipe some of the smeg off that as well. The reason this throttle body only had one bolt in it is because the other one's there and it's seized in and has been drilled off or snapped off at some point. And that leads to another point. This is the airbox, which I've just cleaned, and I couldn't work out what that connector was for. Well, it turns out it's the same one that had one pipe going to it, and I've reattached the second pipe and, well, in fact, reattached the pipe to it and tucked it out the way down there. So I'm assuming that last time somebody had to take all of this apart, they probably knackered the airbox trying to get that screw out, and therefore the airbox that turned up had a sensor on it and they've ended up with two sensors. So it sort of makes sense. That screw wouldn't go in either, so I've tapped the hole out, and now I can actually put this together and put a new air filter in it and pretend it's lovely and clean and mint in there. Airbox refitted with one bolt that actually tightens up now, so that's actually pretty sturdy. New air filter fitted, crankcase breathers and bits connected. That's the pair valve for like letting fresh air into the exhaust, so it runs a little bit cleaner. So all of that is connected. I've found something that was disconnected that shouldn't have been. I've got new throttle cables. This stuff is looking, well, it's still looking miserable to be fair, but at least it's functional. With the airbox all back together, I decided it was time to check the water, and I'm pleased I did check the water. I don't imagine this holds much over 2 litres of water, and I've put 1.5 litres in it, which is a little worrying because firstly, where did it go? Secondly, how's it been running with no water in it? So I'm kind of hoping when I come back in the morning there isn't a pool of water all over the bench and that's still full, and I'm hoping when I start it up it'll run at temperature and not spit all its water out and make me think there's a head gasket gone. Either way, it's probably a little bit late to do anything about it, so fingers crossed. Sure, it'll be fine. With a fill of Motul in the engine ready to be splashed around, we just need a battery, which I'm hoping will be here tomorrow because time is ticking. There are a few other little jobs left to do on the service side, and one of them is to change the clutch cable because, again, a bit like the throttle cables, having a cable snap makes riding your bike really awkward. So that's going to get changed. The transmission oil in the like shaft drive thing, I'm going to change that as well, and I think that's about it. And top the engine oil up when it's run, and then find some other stuff that's wrong with it. It's getting late. So I'm making some solid progress on the Deauville, but remember, I'm not doing this for fun. Trust me, there's things I'd much rather be doing than working on that pile of junk. I'm working on that pile of junk because it needs to take me from Land's End to John O'Groats as part of the Longest Day Challenge. Now the Longest Day Challenge, the 1,000-mile non-motorway route Land's End to John O'Groats on the longest day of the year, is to raise money for Cancer Research UK. So far, it's been overwhelming how much support you wonderful people out there have been giving the bike and me and the challenge. But there is always more. So if you've already paid me some money, that is mega and a massive, massive thank you. If you haven't, click on the link in whichever corner I've put it in, and you can give us money to fight cancer using this horrible old Honda. So it might not be quite the next day that I'm ready to fit the battery to the Deauville, because I spent yesterday, having finished my BMW TT prep, getting the twin ready. And it wasn't just a couple of finishing touches, it had to go on the dyno and be mapped because it's just got a tuned engine in it. So that awesome little bike does 104 horsepower at the wheel from a 660 twin. The Deauville, which is ever so slightly bigger capacity, does just over half that power. But it's okay because it's not about power, it's about power to weight. So it goes even more wrong, isn't it? Because that's 230-ish kilograms and that's 152. Deauville's going to be slow. Oh well, it might be slow, but it does actually need to be working. And on that note, I have booked its MOT because it has to be done today, otherwise it won't get done before TT. So that is on for its MOT in 3 hours and 50 minutes. It's not run since I've owned it. Let's get cracking. No pressure. As well as a new battery, we also have 2 clutch cables, one of which is old and slightly rusty inside, and this one is brand new and handmade by the lovely lads at Carrot Cycles. Thanks, boys! I'm going to fit this, fit the battery, and then I'm just going to see if the bike actually turns over as a start, and if it does, I shall fit the fuel tank and see if we can make fire be inside it. Shiny new clutch cable fitted, shiny new battery fitted, all fitted to a horrible old Deauville. I have spun it over on the starter motor and it does spin over. And that's the fuel pump priming. Let's see if it can be live. Yes! Listen to that mighty beast. Tick over is a little high, but yeah, we actually have a running motorbike. That was surprisingly easy. Kind of hoping all this smoke is just from the exhaust pipe. I probably ought to check. Yes, look at all the power there. The power burning off, so it'll be even slower. Right, we'll run that for a minute and then we'll check the fluid levels. Not quite sure what the FI light's for though. The Deauville starts lovely, but there is a bit of a problem, and it involves that. So we can count the flashes, and it does 2 long flashes, 1, 2, and then 9, 1, 2, 9 short flashes, which tells us that it's fault code 29, which apparently is the inlet air control valve, and it's like an idle adjustment valve. And I think that is definitely the problem, because if I start the bike, it revs quite a lot, and that's not really ideal. So I need to take it apart. And see if I can clean up and fix, or just see if there's a broken connection or something on the valve that's in there. And if not, we shall beat it with a stick. This has got very quickly a little bit more in depth, because over on the workbench, these are the throttle bodies, and this little thing here is the inlet air idle control valve thing. There is a proper term for it, that's close enough, and basically that opens a little channel in here and pushes more air in or something on tick over, basically, so it starts nice and cold and that sort of thing. Not entirely sure, but you get the gist of what it does. So my plan is to take it apart and hit it with a hammer and see if I can fix it, because that sounds like an excellent thing to do. Moment of truth, I've put it back together, I've preset it by hand, I wound it all the way in, which I assumed would be the most tick over available, and then wound it out 4 turns. I have no idea whether this is any good or not, but we're about to find out. Well, we've still got a fault code, but we do have a much more practical tick over now. So it's time to put the panels back on, and I've done a little bit of racetrack engineering. The indicator was going to fall out because round the back all the lugs are broken, so it's now held on with a cable tie, which conveniently is actually holding the whole panel together because there's cracks everywhere. So that's a solid bit of engineering, and then I realised if I cut this section out here, then I can actually get to the radiator cap by just taking the little like cubby hole out the side panel that sits up here, and then I can get to the radiator. So if I need to top up water while I'm in motion, well, at least while I'm on the trip, I can actually do it without taking the panels off. Clever thinking. That has been a bit of a rush putting everything back together. So the pannier outers, I had to change the latches on them, and then I had to remember how all the actual mechanism worked to release them, and then I had to mount those, and everything clicks into everything else and sort of fits in. And the front of the bike isn't too bad. The back of the bike is surprisingly awkward to put together. But it is done. It's 4:01. I'm going to message my friendly MOT man and see if I can turn up a few minutes late, and then see what else is wrong with it, because I'm sure there's going to be something, which is why I want somebody independent to have a look at it. It's turning into one of them days. The Deauville is not in the workshop because it's outside with a fresh MOT on it. Admittedly with a few advisories, but luckily nothing that was actually bad enough to fail it, so that is a Brucey bonus. The ride there and back did show up a couple of interesting things. The idle control thing is a little bit of a game because it basically, once it's in gear, wants to do 3,000 RPM all the time, which isn't, you know, too bad once you're moving, but in town it's not perfect. And when I was told it jumps out a second if you accelerate hard, you know, it jumps out a second all of the time. So the trick I've learnt already is first, and as soon as you accelerate, straight to third, and then it seems fine, except if you're in town, then it wants to go under 3,000 RPM, and the idle won't let it, so you basically start on the back brake all the time. So it's got some character, some of which might be fixed, or might not. But anyway, the bike is working. It is going to be crap to ride for 1,000 miles, which is why you should give me some money by pressing on the link, because this is for a cancer research charity, for Cancer Research UK, and it is a good cause, so you should give me some money, because that, it might be reasonably comfortable, but it is already really crap. Quite tired today. Got back from the Isle of Man at 6:30 this morning and I've had 3 hours sleep, and the last thing I really want to do is work on that Honda, but in 9 days time it's got to do Land's End to John O'Groats, and I've got a BSB meeting in between and 2 days coaching with Rapid and some other stuff, so I kind of need to get it finished today. Now it is fully road legal now, MOT, taxed, insured, the lot. Unfortunately it's still terrible, so I've been shopping on the internet and I have a few items for it. These handlebars apparently are straight, and they were £25 on eBay. I might give them a quick lick of paint before I attach them to the bike though, because the chrome is falling off them. These throttle bodies were £40 on eBay. They don't work. The throttle position sensor is cream crackered on them, but the idle control valve is supposedly working, so I'm going to take them apart, rob the idle control valve out of it, and hopefully then my bike will actually tick over. These are bar end weights. They're not very heavy, so they might not actually remove much vibration from the Deauville handlebars, but every little helps. Last but not least, I've got some Chinese spotlights. These are also £40 on eBay, and in the depths of the night in northern Scotland, these might be really handy for seeing where I'm going. If we make it to Scotland and the night time. I think it's fair to say these handlebars, the old ones, are quite bent. Yeah, that'd be why they didn't feel very good when I rode on it. Anyway, these ones, now that they're painted silver, will look lovely on it. So we now have working lights. Look at that! I've no idea how much light they'll actually provide in the dark. I'd imagine 40 pounds worth of Chinese light will be brilliant, of course. And there is one more thing we need to do. So Franco, obviously you're used to being in the BSB paddock with the absolute pinnacle of motorcycle engineering, but today you've been helping out on the Deauville. What do you think to the beast?
We've gone well to bike spec, I think. Stepped it up a level, haven't we? Gone half KTM, half Honda. It's been a privilege.
Shall we unveil the finished mighty Deauville?
She's pretty smart.
Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. We've put some orange vinyl on it. And if I'm honest, we've not done a terribly good job of it. There's a couple of little creases here and there. But it is mine and Franco's first time putting vinyl on a bike. So I think we can be proud of what we've achieved here.
It's a good job, that. Yeah. I mean, it's dinner time, so we had to rush it a bit in the end, but...
Quite right. Yeah, priorities.
She's in. It's been a privilege.
It is a beautiful summer's evening here in Lincolnshire, and that means it is time for me to ride the Deauville. So far I've ridden it about a mile to and from MOT, so this is the first time to use anything past third gear, and I have high hopes that it's not going to be utterly terrible. But there is only one way to find out, and that's pop my helmet on and hit the road. Being as I have most of the confidence in the Honda though. I have brought along a few tools. I have a 1/4-inch socket set, which covers like most of the small tooling you will need. A large pair of grips for holding things so that I can then hit them with the hammer. And I think that's about it. Oh, and you'll also note the bungee. This pannier closes really, really nicely. That one not so much, so we've added some security. Right, enough of the dilly-dallying, I really actually ought to go and ride it. That is first test ride on the Deauville completed. I have now done 46.6 miles on it. I would like to have reset the trip meter after I'd put petrol in it, but I couldn't because I think the button to set it has broken. So that's a minor annoyance because it is always useful to know how much you've done on a tank of fuel. Luckily, it has a fuel gauge on it, and in the 44 miles after the petrol station stop, the fuel gauge never moved. So I'm kind of hoping it's not broken and it's just very frugal on fuel. I'm going to try and focus on the good things. I quite like the colour. The seat's relatively comfortable. The adjustable screen, actually this is a good thing. The adjustable screen is adjustable enough that I can get it up to get all the wind off me if I'm going somewhere quickly, like on a dual carriageway or on a motorway to get down to the ride, or if I smack it with my hand, I can actually get it to go down low enough that it's useless. So that'll be staying up. The brakes are functional. They stop it in no particularly exciting manner. The engine is, there's no polite way to say it, slow and a bit vibey. And after only 40 miles, I have pins and needles in my feet, so I am going to have to get a bit more rubber or a bit of foam on the footrests. But the handlebars actually felt alright for that. Something else I've learned is that these are actually a 5-speed bike, which means mine's actually a 4-speed bike, because second is useless. Not a particular problem when you're out on a flowing open road, in and out of roundabouts, in and out of junctions. It is quite annoying and quite awkward, but it is manageable. The handling is, I'm going to say, heavy. It's relatively stable and it's relatively good over the bumps because it's so heavy, but it turns like my van, and that is not a compliment. And one last thing, because of course I replaced the automatic idle control valve under here, it's not fixed it. I thought it had, but it turns out it ticks over at 3,000 RPM still, which again, once you're on the open road is not a particular problem because it will be above that. But it does mean round town it's basically cruise control, because 3,000 RPM in third gear is about 27 miles an hour, so maybe it's actually a feature. It's almost cruise control, as long as you only want to do 1 speed. So all in all, I'm going to come clean and say it. It's not that bad. 1,000 miles on it though is definitely going to be a chore. So please, 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 click on the link, give me some money, it's for fighting cancer, and that is a good thing. So the next time I ride the Deauville will actually be heading down to Land's End for the start of the Longest Day Challenge. So thank you for watching, keep tuned for that one, give me money, and join me again next time for some more motorbike fun.